Welcome to Literary and Jury Charge Practice. We'll start with some jury charge practice. Ready? Here we go. On the other hand, if the engineer did not sound the whistle as required by law for the crossing here in question, or did not operate the train at a reasonable speed, then you will take up and consider whether or not such negligence on the part of the defendant was a proximate cause of the accident. If you find from the evidence that the defendant railway company was negligent in the manner claimed by the plaintiff, and you further find that such negligence was a proximate cause of the accident, then it becomes your duty to bring in a verdict in favor of the plaintiff, even though you find that the accident was caused by the combined negligence of the engineer and the driver of the car, Harold Hopkins. The negligence of the driver of the car does not relieve the railway company from liability if the negligence of the engineer contributed to proximately cause the accident. If the accident was caused by the sole negligence of Mr. Hopkins in the operation of the car, then there is no liability on the part of the defendant railway company. But if the accident was caused by the combined negligence of the driver of the car and the negligence of the engineer on the train in failing to sound the whistle for the crossing, or in failing to operate the train at a reasonable speed, and the negligence of each was a substantial factor in proximately causing the accident, then you will find a verdict in favor of the plaintiff and against the defendant. The burden of proof rests upon the plaintiff to prove by the preponderance of the evidence that the defendant railway company was negligent as claimed by the plaintiff, and that its negligence was a substantial factor in proximately contributing to cause the accident. If on this question you find from the evidence that the defendant was negligent as claimed by the plaintiff, and that the negligence of the defendant substantially contributed to proximately cause the accident, then you will find a verdict for the plaintiff for all of the injuries and damages sustained by him. But if on this question of defendant's negligence you find the evidence evenly balanced or preponderating in defendant's favor, then the plaintiff cannot recover. If you so find, then your verdict will be in favor of the defendant, no cause of action. To briefly sum up the issues, if the accident was caused by the combined negligence of the driver of the car and the railway company, then your verdict will be for the plaintiff and against the defendant for the full amount of the damages sustained. But if you find that the defendant was not negligent and that the accident was caused by the sole negligence of the driver of the car, then your verdict will be for the defendant, no cause of action. If you find that the plaintiff is entitled to recover, then the last question for you to decide is the question of damages. Let's read a bit of literary material now. And this is an article in the NCRA magazine called Labor of Love. You should treat court reporting school as a full-time job. And it's written by the NCRA Student Committee. Ready? I have two experiences as a student. one myself being a student as well as being a child of a student. When I was in school, my job was to get through school. I waitressed at a high-end restaurant on Friday and Saturday nights to take care of my responsibilities. All other time was spent on the machine. By the time of 150 and beyond, practice was a minimum 20 hours out of school a week and at least 12 hours at school. My mom graduated court reporting school in 19 months. I was 14. She went to school, raised 3 kids, and helped my dad run his business. I'm truly amazed by her perseverance. She would practice everywhere in crazy noise levels, etc., with her headphones on. Her example to her children would fill too many pages and would still not be able to describe all that she taught us about being independent, the ability of caring for others emotionally, physically, and financially, and never ever giving up on goals, no matter the sacrifice to achieve them. I know some students have to work. There is no other choice. For those that have some flexibility, I do encourage you to look at how many hours you are not spending at your machine as a low-income job, where if you practiced an additional 16 hours a week, you could get out of school 6 months earlier and your bottom line will be much better off. Since starting court reporting school in 2011, I have been a full-time employee by day and a full-time student by night. From 2011 to 2012, I worked at a law firm in downtown Los Angeles. Since 2012, I work at a court reporting agency full-time, answering phones and managing the calendar, transcript production, and video production. In addition to my work for Bayside, I also answer phones and manage the calendar for 4 other CSR-owned court reporting agencies. Needless to say, I am usually pretty busy at work every day, and taking a vacation is not easy to do, as I am the only one who works in the office. To some jury charge practice. And the subject of this jury charge is our agricultural development. Ready? In these days of exploration into the atom on one hand and space travel on the other, anything to do with agriculture probably seems prosaic to most people. Yet there is, in truth, no more romantic page in history than the amazing advance and development of our agricultural production efficiency in recent decades. The dynamics of agriculture have changed not only the face, but indeed the very character of America. I understand this is the 84th annual convention of your association. Assuming the meetings have been held each year, this sets the first convention back in the year 1875. Probably few people realize that as many people were employed on the farms of the United States when this association held its first convention as there are now when you are holding your 84th. Direct employment on farms today is no greater than at the end of the Civil War, even though the population of the country has increased almost 5 times. Moreover, at the end of the First World War, we had reached an acreage of developed cropland which never ever since has been exceeded in any significant degree and probably never will be. On what has been a static cropland base for almost 4 decades, the national population has increased 2/3. yet we are now better fed and more abundantly provided with farm products than ever before in our history. My father was born in 1876. He learned to farm with horse-drawn tools. In his youth, the proportion of families engaged in agriculture was one on the farm and one off, in contrast to a proportion of 2 to 1 during my grandfather's life. Thus, we have evidence that production per farm family had increased about 50% in one generation. When I was born in 1908, the proportions had changed again to one family on the farm for each 2 who lived and worked in an urban environment. This came from further production efficiencies in agriculture in the 3 decades from my father's birth to mine. But all this was only a start. Throughout the 50 years with which I can speak with some assurance, the tempo of change has continued at an increasing rate. From one farm family for each 2 non-farm families 50 years ago, we now have more than 7 non-farm families for each 1 directly engaged in agriculture. The national population is 88% urban in earning its livelihood and its way of thinking. This, of course, includes some people who live in the country, although they do not make their livelihood in agriculture. When I was a boy, the 2-mile stretch of country road that I recognized as the home community had 12 families, all making their living directly from farming. Today, 14 families live on the same road. All 12 of the original houses are occupied, and 2 new ones have been built. Only 5 of these families are now full-time farmers. 2 run part-time farms, and 7 make their livelihood entirely outside of agriculture. Judging from the cars they drive and the appliances in their homes, the neighborhood never before has been so well off. All right, let's read a little more from our literary material. Ready? I love what I do, though, as it is teaching me how to become a good court reporter before I graduate, and what to do and what not to do once I pass the CSR. I have 5 amazing bosses I can look up to and ask any questions I may have, and they educate me on how they would personally handle situations that come up at the office. The absolute hardest thing about working full-time and going to school full-time is coming home after work and not getting to plop down and just relax after a long day of work. Somehow within myself I have to find the desire and motivation to practice. I'm not going to lie. There have been days where I just can't convince myself to get on my machine. It's a daily battle my brain and body have. I entice myself by setting up rewards after a practice session. Practice for 1 hour, have a bowl of ice cream. Practice for 1 more hour, watch a TV show. For a while, I debated about staying at my current job as an office manager instead of becoming a court reporter, but I realized that as much as I love my job more than any other job I've had before, I know I'm going to love being a CSR more. That is by Celeste Poppe, Poppe, from Los Angeles, California. Working for the paycheck. But what about those who may have a job that's completely unrelated to court reporting? It just takes a creative mindset to see the benefit in any job and to trust that everything you do in your life is working towards that singular goal. Learning stenography is a tough task, but learning stenography while working a full-time job is even harder. To pay for my one-bedroom apartment, tuition, bills, and life in general, I work as a server waitress. I do like my job, but like most jobs, some days are much harder than others. The flexibility of my schedule, the earning potential, and, well, the earning potential is what keeps me going. I love it when people are nice to me, respectful of my job and what I'm doing, and tip me appropriately. Some people are rude and even disrespectful, but I always remember that not all people are like that and that my job still needs to be done. Because of this job, I've bettered my communication skills and am able to pay to live and survive. I've met some very interesting people while serving, many of whom are understanding of how difficult it is to learn steno and respect me for that along with working full-time. Overall, I'm very thankful for this job and all the skills it has provided me, but I can't wait to change chapters and begin my new career as a certified court reporter. And that is by Janine Alexis from Atlanta, Georgia. All right, let's get back to some jury charge practice. Ready? Total production of the farm has doubled in 30 years, which means that output per man is now 4 times as great as it was 3 decades ago. Every farm that has properly adjusted to the changing technology of agricultural production has made one of 3 adjustments. It has expanded onto more acreage for the same labor force, or it is operated much more intensely with the same labor force, or it is doing a comparable volume of business with a much reduced labor force. Many combinations of these adjustments are possible and have been used. The farms which have not adjusted will not produce a level of living acceptable to most families now. Commercial farming is less and less a way of life and more a way of making a living. It is governed by the same economic dictates that govern manufacturing or banking or any other process of putting together cost factors to turn out economic products. This does not mean farms are becoming big business. They are still family units in about the same degree which they have been for generations. However, successful ones are family commercial units instead of family subsistence units. They are mechanized as never before. They are specialized in increasing degree. They are capitalized as no other farms ever have been. Such farms operate in a more intimate relationship with urban industry. Industry furnishes the tools and the endless array of services without which today's commercial farm operation would quickly grind to a halt. Let's start another jury charge, and the subject of this jury charge is malpractice. Ready? Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, This action is brought by Mark Russell as plaintiff against Dr. James E. Brookshire as defendant, and by this action the plaintiff seeks to recover certain damages arising out of an alleged malpractice or negligence on the part of the defendant in treating the plaintiff. It appears without dispute that on May 18, 1958, the defendant was a licensed physician and surgeon, that on said May 18, 1958, the plaintiff was employed by the Harris Milling Company, and while so employed received a scalp wound as a result of which he went to the defendant's office for treatment. The defendant did treat the plaintiff for the scalp wound, including an injection by means of a hypodermic needle into plaintiff's left arm of a certain horse serum or antitoxin for tetanus. The plaintiff's left arm began to swell up about 2 days after the injection of this serum, and the defendant from time to time administered to the plaintiff certain sedatives to relieve the pain which followed this injection. And that will conclude our literary and jury charge practice.